Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Anna Clements, and this is Audiobooks with Anna, where we explore the fascinating world of audiobooks with industry experts. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here. We've got a couple of very special guests with us here today. We've got Sean Pratt and Karen Commins coming to talk to us about hobbies. So hopefully you're all ears and you've all got questions and thoughts that you'd like to come up and chat about. These two particular people have very prominent hobbies that we all know about, and I'm excited to chat with them about them. So the thought of the day is whether or not our hobbies are part and parcel of our creative lives and how they add or connect with our creative lives. And I'm really curious to chat with them both about how they feel that these two things connect. But if I might just start perhaps with Karen, since your mic is on. Karen, hello and welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, hello, and thank you so much for hosting this room. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to having, and I think we're all going to learn a lot. I know I am. So thanks so much for hosting it. I think just to start off, I think that so often we feel like we can't indulge in creative hobbies unless we can make some money from them. And that's just so not the case. And so hopefully that's one of the things we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Talk to us a minute then, Karen, about your particular hobby. What do you do outside of work that gets you fired up?
Well, thanks for asking. I'm a very amateur musician. I play the harp. I've always been a musician. I took piano lessons from at second grade, and then in school and high school, I was in the band. I played clarinet and then oboe and then flute, and nothing ever really grabbed me. I chose those things for the wrong reasons, but I felt like the harp chose me. And I didn't start playing harp until I was in my 30s. And, coming at something as an adult is a bit different. And we have very high expectations of ourselves, and we're not used to being in a learning curve about things. But, I've had people say, "Oh, you play the harp? Where do you play?" As if I play in the symphony somewhere. Like there's some expectation that I can't just do that in my house because I enjoy it. And so I do play the harp in my house because I enjoy it.
I absolutely love that, Karen. I'm actually reminded of the reactions we get when we say we're audiobook narrators, and people will say things like, "That's a job, like they pay you to do that." And I feel like sometimes people, particularly people who aren't musicians, might wonder why one might pass the time playing an instrument because they don't know the joy that there is in playing an instrument. But I'm actually really curious how you went from what were essentially wind instruments across to string. How did that happen, that transition? Because it sounds like you were very musical anyway.
Well, that's true, but I stopped playing oboe and flute probably in my 20s because life got busy and I wasn't part of any sort of band, and so it just kind of fell by the wayside. And the harp is actually a percussion instrument, though it does have strings, but it's actually like the piano considered a percussion instrument. And it was just that I heard this person play the harp, and it was at the Stone Mountain Highland Festival, which is a very big Scottish Games event here in Atlanta every year. And I heard this young girl playing a harp, and I thought, oh, wow, if she can do that, I can too. I did not know that at the time I heard this girl, she had been studying harp for, 10 years. She was going to college in harp performance. I didn't quite realize what I was letting myself in for, but it was that sound. It's just I had to get that sound in my life. It just does for me what nothing else does. I perk up every time I hear the sound of the harp. So it it's because it spoke to me. And I saw in the chat that Keith Brown says his wife's a harpist. So, of course, I want to know more about that. And somebody asked what kind of harp I have. It's a Lion and Healy Style 11. It's a 47 string concert harp like you'd see in the symphony, but I don't play it as well as anybody who's in the symphony. So
I,
It's
I
kind of
need a
the
I need a mini introduction to harps, Karen, if you wouldn't mind. How on earth did you choose? Is there like a junior harp and you move up the scale, as it were, or did you just go big harp from the start? And did
oh
you
well,
just buy it outright?
oh well, thanks. That's a great question. Actually, I did move my way up. The first one I heard was what's called a lever harp. So in music, if you think of the piano, the white keys are whole notes and the black keys are half notes. And so if you have a sharp or a flat on a piano, you're always hitting a black key. So to make that same sound on a lever harp, you have to actually flip a little lever on each string. And then there's what's called a pedal harp, where you have seven pedals, one for each note of the octave. And whether it's up, it's if it's up, it's a flat note. If it's in the middle, it's a regular whole note. And if it's down at the bottom, it's a sharp. So you play a lever harp differently than you play a pedal harp. But I started with a lever harp, a small one that a local maker made. And then it looks like it's a more what people would think of as a Celtic harp. It's got that smaller body and more of it's a different curve than you'd see in a symphony harp. And symphony harps are much taller, heavier, and they're what's called pedal harps. So I started with lever harp, and I think my first one had 26 strings, where a full concert harp has 47. And then I went to a 29 string lever harp, and then I got a lever harp that looks like a concert harp because I love that look. And I think it had 40 strings, and then I got my first pedal harp. So I mean, it's been a progression. I sold my first pedal harp in 2016 because I wasn't playing it, and I cried the day it left the house. And then in 2022, I started playing again. We bought another pedal harp, and then in December 23, I got my dream, my Style 11. So hopefully that's a good introduction to what harps are like.
Yes, yes, no, absolutely. Can I ask about, and Sean, we haven't forgotten you. I do apologize for not bringing you in, but I'm just so fascinated by the harp at the moment. Talk to me about the decision to start and how long it took you to actually consciously feel that you wanted to then upgrade, because I'm assuming this is over several years.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, on a 26, it didn't take anything to decide to start, because the day I heard this girl playing is the day I decided I'm going to do that too. And I had never really thought about harps or seen them before. So it was, this feeling of just being run over by a fast moving train, and I've got to jump on it and before it leaves the station or something, because I just had to have it. But my harp was limited in what I could play with 26 strings. There's only 26 notes, so I'd have to keep adjusting music if it went out of the range that I could play on that instrument. So that's what kept me. Buy a bigger one, and then I bought the one that had 40 strings. And then I decided to move from lever to pedal. And my first pedal harp had, I want to say it had 40 strings. And then the one we bought in 22 had 47, and the one I've got now has 47. So I can play, well, okay, the harp has the capability of playing all the notes. I won't say that I can necessarily play them all or not necessarily play them well. I try.
And not yet, perhaps. That is very much music is one of those things that unfortunately you can, the practice moves you up in sections, but there always feels like there's more space to go, isn't there? There's always
Well,
somewhere else to travel to, more music to be played.
but that's true. But I think that's true of all of our creative endeavors, including drawing and painting, as our friend Mr. Pratt does,
Indeed.
because he has astonishing talent. I mean, that's what made me want to have this conversation in the first place, is because I kept seeing things he'd post, and I have so many questions about
Well,
that.
let's
So
introduce him a second
maybe
and ask him about it.
all right.
Sean, there's a microphone in the bottom right hand corner of your screen that should allow you to mute and unmute at your leisure. Talk to us about your hobby. What do you do? Did we lose you, Sean? You haven't unmuted your mic, and so we can't hear you yet.
I
Yeah,
didn't think he's usually this quiet.
indeed not. Indeed not. There's on your actual avatar, there's a little microphone with a line through it. It tells you you're muted and allows us not to hear you. But with any luck, if you press that button in the bottom right hand corner, it should unmute your microphone and allow you to speak to us.
Hello.
Hooray!
Ah, there you are.
Feverishly trying to fix my Luddite ability
Talk to us
here.
about your hobby, Mr. Pratt. Tell us what it is you do in your spare time that isn't related to your work.
Well, people have seen that I sketch, and I started sketching when I was a kid. Immediately, as a child, I drew and painted all the time. I was the shy, artistic middle child in the family, and but I did it all through school. And when I got to high school, I took art classes, which I really enjoyed, and then I even took a couple in college. And growing up in the theater, you spend a lot of time in the green room backstage, and so there was plenty of time to practice. Because I don't really draw from imagination. I have to see what I'm drawing. For me, it's an exercise in observation. To take when you really, really begin to look at that, and I guess it would hand in glove with being an actor, which is all about specificity and the ability to really actually draw what you see, not what you think you see. And that was drilled into me from my very early art classes. And I did that through my teens and 20s, but in my mid 30s, once I had a family going, I just didn't have time. Even when I was on set, I was learning lines or I was doing 10,000 other things. And it wasn't so I took a long break from about age 40 through 50. And then starting when I hit 50, I began to pick it up again. And I've had a lot more time to focus on it. And I used to just use pencils, just black and white. But when I picked it up again at 50, I decided I wanted to start experimenting with colored pencils. I never really played with that. And so that's been a real fun journey to explore the possibilities of color. And I'm not, and this gets back to also to what is a hobby? The dictionary defines it as a pursuit outside your regular occupation, especially done for relaxation. And that is exactly what it's for, because I have lived with text, either memorizing lines or in theater and film, now audiobooks for almost 30 years, and then teaching on top of it. My whole day is about language. And it just feels like one side of my brain gets really heavy with all the all the
Mm,
synapses firing. And so to me, drawing it balances that other side of it out. And along with music, and something that I don't post my music. I've played guitar for years and years, although recently it seems I've been less engaged in it. Although I'm not worried. I've gone through periods where I've put my pencil down or the guitar down, and then a month or months might pass before I pick it up again, and I'll just get an itch for it, and then I'll pick it up and do it. But it has one purpose, which is for fun. I post the things I draw online just for my own pleasure. Every so often I'll have people say, "Can I buy that from you?" And the answer is always no. I don't do commissions, and I don't sell them, although I do give them away on occasion to friends or family. But it's purely for the entertainment value of what a hobby truly is. And what, like Karen said earlier, unfortunately, because it's an American thing, you always turn your hobby into your side hustle. And they it's like, no, I'm not trying to become a graphic artist. In fact, I had a teacher from college reach out to me. She had written a children's book, and we're friends on Facebook, and she had seen all my sketches, and she said, would you be interested in doing the drawings for my children's book? And I said, no, I wouldn't, because then it changes the nature of my relationship to the actual work itself. It's one thing if you're doing it for fun and I can pick whatever I do, and I have very eclectic democratic tastes. I'll draw anything that catches my fancy. But you put a price tag on it or a deadline, and it really does change the entire nature of your relationship to your quote hobby.
mm-hmm.
And that's really important to me. The other one now, although I say that, I started learning Spanish about 3 years ago on, thank you, Duolingo. Um, and it was meant to be sort of a fun exercise that's been a hobby, but now I really do want to kick it up a notch. I'm not getting the results I want. And so I approached from the beginning. I said, I'm going to have fun learning this. I'm not going to, stress out about trying to learn another language at my age. That, it's not do or die. I'm not moving to Madrid tomorrow. Um, but that one's actually transitioning into something a little more focused about really actually trying to understand how to speak Spanish both as a mental exercise, to keep my brain sharp, but also because I just want to. I want to be understood when I go to Spain.
I'm aware, Sean, that you've drawn us across so many different hobbies, and I know that Karen is desperate to talk to you about the drawing. So,
Okay, sure.
Karen, take a moment to pick a question that you'd like to ask Sean, and just I'd like to come back later on to the idea of you mentioned drawing and music and language and how very different those are. But let's stick with the drawing for a second, because I know Karen went out of her way to actually obviously think about this with quite in depth,
Well,
and I know you've
we
got.
don't have to stick to the drawing. That's just
No,
the
no,
thing that
no. Go
we
ahead.
had.
Go ahead. Go
Well,
ahead.
that's the thing you've shared the most, and I know, like, there was one time, I think sort of recently, I asked you how long did it take you, and you said about 5 hours.
Hmm.
And, like, so when I write articles, but I'm doing that more for a business purpose. It's not a hobby. I write in a journal every day, and that is more along that line. But when I think about 5 hours to create that, and I'm thinking most of my days don't have 5 hours flex in them. So I'm wondering, did you do it all in once, or do you do a little bit, like 30 minutes a day? Or do you, I mean, what, like, I do try to play my harp at least 30 minutes a day, but there are days I will only play it a minute because one of my harp teachers said, play every day, even if you don't practice. And that has been life changing to me because I told you I sold my previous one in 2016 because I'd gotten where I wasn't playing it. There would be months that I was not playing. And I felt like, well, it should be played, and I'd see it. Every day I'd walk by it, and I'd not playing it, and then there's all this guilt because I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of baggage that we attach to ourselves, even with a hobby. So so I may only play a minute one day because that's all I could put in it, but it keeps my connection to the instrument, keeps my love of it going. So going back to the 5 hours to do the sketch, is that all in one go, or do you do a little bit every day, or how does that
Yeah.
work for
No,
you?
no. It's a little. So I usually sketch at the end of my day. So after I've finished recording and teaching for the day, I might have a beer and then sit down, or not, or a cup of coffee or something. And then what's nice is I have a table where I can leave all my art supplies out at my house, and so that's right there. There's no excuse about dragging it out. Although when I'm traveling, there's that, well, I don't want to pull all the stuff out and get
Yeah,
settled and so on. But I follow that 5 minute rule. Just draw for 5 minutes, and it usually starts with I'll see something. Sometimes I'll just type in a word search. I'll say Egyptian art, or I'll say comic book art, or Art Deco, and I'll just start flicking through the Google lookup until something grabs my attention. Or I'll see something on Facebook. I did one of the Beatles recently that I saw on a T-shirt. It was a cartoon illustration of the Beatles rooftop concert. And then but the next thing I did was a pair of bookends that I found when I was looking around at Art Deco objects, and then I did a landscape. And I don't have a theme; it's just whatever catches my fancy. And sometimes I'll grab something because I think it's challenging, and other times I just like the look of it. But yeah, I might draw for. There's an arc. There's only so much bandwidth at the end of the day, or so much energy, because obviously
yes.
I don't want to hurry and screw anything up because it's very difficult to erase colored pencil. So sometimes I will just work for 15 minutes. Sometimes it might be a solid hour. But no, I don't try to do it and that's the thing. If I was doing it for real,
There's a
then I
pressure there.
right, then you would have to develop just like we do as narrators. You have to develop the stamina, the vocal and mental stamina to narrate, for hours a day. It takes time. And so for me, that's not the purpose of the event. The purpose is to relax and to get into the piece. So I put some relaxing music on, and I got my cup of tea with me or whatever, and then I just start in, and I'll sketch on anything. I have a variety of sketch books. I have one that I got, which is these pages, and it tells you what to draw, like draw a sailboat, draw a bee, draw something, and so it challenges you to come up with something, because sometimes I hate to say it, you have to decide on what you're going to sketch. And then I have a formal book, the ones you usually end up on Facebook. It's a big, like, 10 by 12 sketchbook so I can do a larger piece, but I don't usually make them larger than that. And I'm not really interested in doing some huge complex thing that I see, real professional artists do. But it's meant to be, like I said, it's a chance to really observe. And now that I'm playing with color, it adds a whole different dimension to it. About, because you never use straight color, you're always blending. And I find that really just, like I said, relaxing. It just unwinds me from the day, which I think a hobby, and that's really what a hobby should do. You should leave the hobby at the end of whether it's 15 minutes or an hour, feeling relaxed, not stressed out because you screwed something up, or that, there is no deadline. There is no final bit to it, unless you decide to impose something like that on it. But I really do think not having those we as freelancers, we live and die by deadlines. And so to me, a good hobby should take away all of that stress. There is no deadline. There is no, and I will be honest, when I first started sharing my drawings several years ago, I was a little nervous. Like it's like I see people who will post things about their hobbies, or, maybe a video. And then of course there's always that one jackass who wants to leave some rude comment.
Yeah.
But I've been lucky, I suppose. I mean, not that I wear my heart on my sleeve. I put it out there, and I only sometimes I will share it on my professional page to show people I do more than just teach and record. And I've always gotten nice, comments, which is sweet. But I strictly do it for myself, and I share it with the people who are, quote, my friends online. But it's the relaxation factor, and then of course, once as you do with your harp, once you get into whatever your hobby is, you learn, once you get the basics sort of down, you begin to journey into that. You start a journey that someone who does it professionally did way before you. Meaning, someone who's a full-time illustrator, they were in the same place I was, but they were like 10 or 12 or whatever. And I'm just having fun hanging out at that beginning stage and enjoying it for that reason.
Well, and you said it's a practice and observation, and I wondered, do you feel like it helps you though in your work as a narrator and a coach?
Oh, absolutely. It's a different kind of observation. Well, when I'm narrating, working with my students or narrating, it's always about text analysis. So that's what I'm observing, the use of the language to tell the story and how that affects the performance. And that's what I teach. And so this is different because now we're looking at objects and color and shading and form, which works a different part of your brain. And like I said, it feels balanced. I really do some days come out of the booth and I feel like I'm listing to one side,
Hmm.
that my brain is so full of language. And frankly, just as I know we're talking about sketching, but that's also why I know for a fact it's been a real slog for me to learn Spanish, because at the end of the day, my brain has been wired for English for hours and hours and hours,
Hmm.
and then to try to put together another language in my head sometimes is just it's like walking through molasses. But to me, the sketching, there's no vocabulary there. It's a visual element. And so it challenges me to, like I said, to pause and really look like, well, that's not the right shade of orange, or does the line really do that? And, oh, I see. This figure's not, it's not actually a circle, it's more of an oval or whatever. And I can literally feel the stress start to, like, seep out my toes as the day, as the hour or 15 minutes goes on. And when I quit, for me, it's about peaking. It's like I'll be going along and suddenly I literally can feel like a switch get thrown, where I suddenly I've like, oh, okay, if I keep on going, I'm going to screw up. I'm tired now. And like I said, that can be 15 minutes or an hour. But once I feel that shift, I just put the pencil down and I won't go back to it, because I know from experience, if I try to keep pushing, I will eventually make a mistake, or get frustrated about something and I'll stop seeing. So, and once again, I can do that because it is a hobby.
Karen, do you find that you are aware of there being like a maximum point, a point where you have to rest? I imagine at the beginning, particularly, your hands must have got very tired with a very different sort of muscle memory requirement.
That is so true. And even being away, like when we were on the audiobooks at Sea Cruise, and so I'm not even gone a week, but coming back, it was almost like, what is this? How do I play this? Because that muscle memory, even in that short period of time, had decreased a little bit. And sometimes even from night to night when I practice, it's like this was much better yesterday than it is today. So yeah, there is, and I try to play earlier in the day. The earlier I can play, the better I play, the longer I'll play. It doesn't usually work out for me that way. It's usually more in the evening, like after we eat, and sometimes it's very late. And those are the nights that it's 1 minute of arpeggios, and that's about all I can do. I was wondering, Sean, if you ever have the inner critic yammering to you when you're doing your, because I know when I play, I do. And sometimes even about sharing it, worried about sharing it, especially after a professional musician told me, I really admire your courage for sharing your harp videos. She didn't say it, but it's my mistake enhanced, full of hesitations, not brilliantly perfect like a professional harp video. Because it goes back to that whole American thing of, well, I've got to be perfect if I'm going to put it out in public and have that. So do you ever feel like the inner critic is saying, "Oh man, that is the worst thing you ever drew," or
Um,
and Anna, I want you to, if you can jump in with how we can tamp that inner critic down when it wants to rear up its ugly head.
I actually was really curious, and sorry, just to continue with the question for Sean to answer. You mentioned about how sometimes when you're more tired or you feel you did badly, I'm wanted to bring it back a second to audiobooks. There are moments when I do auditions and I think, oh, today's not the day, and I'll
Mm.
I'll worry about this tomorrow. And I come back and I listen to what I did the day before, and I go, hey, that's not half bad.
Yeah.
And I'm really aware there are moments when my brain is like, this is rubbish, put it to one side, you're no good at this. And then when I have a clearer head, I go, actually, I can see how I need to fix this. Or there is just that one place where if I change that, this is great, I can send this off. And Sean, I'm aware that we've had conversations before with, I think when you and Johnny were on, about the lack of inner critic that you have. But is there a sense sometimes where you look at something and you feel it's less good and then better when you look back on it? Does that happen to you?
well, all all of my drawings have mistakes in them that I see. You know, I know that they're not going to be perfect. But because for me the stakes are so low, I don't feel now. I don't feel that inner critic saying this is terrible. But I also have done something over the years where I have different sketchbooks for different things. So I have a sketchbook that I take on holiday with me where I just draw different bits and bobs. And I also have one that I take with me when I travel, when I'm stuck in airports. I'll sketch whatever's around me. And those are really loose and fast, and they're meant to be like that. They're just like exercises in shading or shape or something. They're just, but when I actually, so I that sort of keeps me my skills sharp. And so those are full of just mistakes and scratch outs. And but when I really want to do one that I like, let's say the Beatles one that I did several, like last month I released it. I think I put it up on Facebook. I find a picture like, oh, I really want to do that one. So sometimes I'll do little quick side sketches of what I want to, how it's going to be, and then I'll go ahead and jump in, and then finally do it. But I'm very methodical. Like I said, since I'm not on a deadline. But I don't. The only inner critic I have is very subtle, like like about learning blending or following the line. But you are right. There are some sketches I have done that just didn't quite turn out the way I wanted them to. The colors weren't right, or the shape, and I don't release those. I would say they maybe, if I've done 100 sketches, maybe a quarter of them I haven't put up for people to see for that reason. So yes, there are times when I'm going, yeah, this one isn't. I'm not a fan of this particular one. Not that I feel like it's a failure, because I always think that I get feedback from it that I can learn from. But I feel like I do. Well, I hate to say it. Your vanity or your pride might kick in a little bit, and you say, "Yeah, I want to show them that I can, like Karen, like play this arpeggio or this little piece because you've worked on it and you want to share that, and so you want it to be of a certain, meet a certain quality for yourself." So there is a second step here. You can have a hobby that you never share with anybody.
Yes.
you know my music started out as a hobby, turned into a way to eat when I was in college, and now came back to being a hobby. So there was a time when I actually approached my music, like playing folk guitar, very seriously, because I had to know. 50, 60 songs at a drop of a hat and play them incredibly well to make money. So the hobby turned into something quite serious, and I deliberately turned it back into a hobby. But the drawing has always been something for fun, and I think that's the key. I don't feel like an imposter or worrying about critics because I know I'm doing it for fun, and that provides a psychological shield for me, I guess is the way to think about it. Because I'm doing it for fun and I don't care what other people think ultimately about it. I'm sharing it because I like it. Then if someone were to jump on and say, well, gee, my 10-year-old could probably do that better. Okay, all right, fine. It's,
I'm reminded of the quote about, what people say is a reflection of them, not you.
yes.
And more often than not, when people criticize, particularly online, it's usually because they feel some kind of shame or embarrassment about the fact that they haven't shared what they're worried about sharing, and they wonder why you feel brave enough to do it. So often it's nothing to do with your talent or lack thereof. It's about them. It's always about them. But I'm really curious, Sean, about what you said about keeping the stakes low. You mentioned that it doesn't matter as much to you because you're keeping the stakes low, and I wonder what you mean by that and how that relates to your work and the things that where the stakes, I guess, are high.
Yeah, I think it's like when I started learning Spanish, I said, I'm going to approach this as a fun thing. Because like I said, it would be different if I knew that I was moving to Mexico City or Madrid in a year and I had a deadline that was going to be real. That was a totally different way of thinking of it. But because the sketching has always been so much a part of me, and it's always been a way, initially it was just a way to pass time. And then as I took some classes in school, I began to learn some technique and I had a little bit of talent at it. But like I didn't really have a desire to become an artist because I was going to be an actor and I took that extremely seriously. So, but it was by accident. It really wasn't by design about the sketching when I started sharing it with people. Because, I'd be in the green room and people would be looking over my shoulder. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is something I'm doing. And from the it was just sort of accidental. I realized that by just being low key about it, the people who viewed the art that I was making, they realized that it was low key, that it wasn't me trying to sort of like big myself up or get above my station or pretend I was going to be the next Van Gogh. I was just doing it for fun. And by keeping the bar low like that and with that attitude, it actually, I think, has made me a better, I say artist, I sketch, I'm a sketcher. It's made me a better sketcher than if I had been like, well, I've got to take classes and I'm going to do this and this. Eh, eh,
We talk a lot here about how being relaxed and ensuring that spaces that allow you to feel relaxed actually make you a better narrator. Getting
yes,
into the booth and being nervous or doing live reads, how much harder that is than actually doing punch and roll in your own booth. Karen, I'm curious. Two things. Sorry, Angela has put a lovely quote in the chat that I must say out loud. It's a Robert Henri quote that says, "The object isn't to make art. It's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable." And I
absolutely.
absolutely
Oh,
love
that's
that.
wonderful.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true. That's
Karen,
true.
I'm curious about how intentional you are with the pieces you learn and when you are brave enough and wonderful enough to share it with us, because there have been several comments in the chat that I agree with. I absolutely love your harp videos that I see online. How far have you got with it by the time you feel willing to share it?
Well, and thanks so much for that compliment. I really appreciate it. And by the way, I want to just note I can read the chat, but it tells me chat is unavailable. So I've not been able to add any comments because I wanted to drop the link to Sean's Beatles picture in the chat. And anyway, so that's why I'm not participating in the chat because Clubhouse doesn't want me to. I don't know. They made some change last week anyway.
It's a
Um,
very unpredictable app, isn't it? Sometimes it doesn't. You
always.
chat away, and I'll go look for it on Instagram.
Always. Well, I started doing them, sharing them every week. And I made the decision to share them, not because I want comments and compliments, which are always so lovely and so nice. And I am so grateful when people have actually taken the time to listen and say something. It's so helpful and so encouraging. And I really appreciate it. But that's not why I'm sharing them. And I'm not sharing them because I think some audiobook producer out there is going to go, oh, she's musical. Let me get her to do a book on music, because there have been so many books on music and nobody ever even thought of my name for them. But I started sharing them because I read this book on creativity and I thought I had it up in front of me and I don't. But it was he was talking about like making a collection of things. And I'm a collector, so that really appealed to me. So because I only play in my house, I'm sharing the videos to give me an actual practice goal. So a lot of times when I was doing it every week, they really weren't ready for me to play them. And so now I've been doing about once a month, and I'm trying to spend more time on them. So I am hopefully playing them better and hopefully learning them better, because I also was feeling pressure on myself. Oh, it's another week. I've got to find another piece to play. And it's like, but I haven't really learned the one I was playing last week. And so just, the video is just capturing a moment in time. And I haven't really gone back and looked at most of them, but there are some where I'm doing take one, take two, and I always think take two is usually better than take one. So for instance, 2 years ago I played Sleigh Ride at Christmas, and it was very toned down. And then last year I did a more involved version of it. And this year I'm hoping to do take three of Sleigh Ride, where it hopefully will be even more involved than last year. But last year I worked on it all year, and this year I haven't been working on it at all. So we'll see if that happens. So it's really just trying to learn a song well enough that I want to make a video of it and share it, and then have that as part of my collection of my art and of my effort in this area. Because otherwise it would sometimes seem like, well, what's the point of learning music if I'm the only one who ever hears it? So it does help me have a practice goal, an intermediate one, of learn something well enough. And I have a very eclectic taste in music, from merengue to Manilow to Mozart. So that keeps me going too. Especially, I can always look for another Barry Manilow song to play. So, in fact, I'm working on one now.
Lovely. I'm two things. I'm reminded of stepping away sometimes from things, whether it's sport or music, and coming back to them often allows you kind of a different insight into them, because the memory doesn't fade. It doesn't it's like riding a bicycle, it doesn't disappear. It takes you a moment to kind of pick it up again, but nothing is ever wasted. I feel like there's a sense of, and I'd be really curious actually to talk to you about, having picked up that piece, having not looked at it over this time, whether you feel that there's something now that's different about you as a person. I love artistic hobbies that allow you to kind of put in your very, very much your own flavor into the art that you're creating. Can I ask you both, what does it give you? What does, Karen, what does time with your harp give you?
I don't know that I can put that in words, really. I mean, just seeing it fills me with joy. And then when I sit at it, it's like, wow, I cannot believe this is mine. It's so beautiful to even look at it. And then playing it and the sound it makes is just like, it's like coming home. This is what I was meant to be doing. There's a soothing to my soul that I get with that I don't get with anything else. And even when I hear other people play it, I listen to Sirius XM Escape all day when I'm in my office and in our house. And the Escape channel is all easy listening, and it's mostly instrumentals. And they play a lot of harp music in between all these other things they play. I mean, or harp rendition of very popular things. So it's just, every time I hear it, it just gives me that little energy jolt of, that's the sound. That's what I want to hear. And it
One.
just fills me with joy just to even think of it. So, like, if I'm really stressed out about something else, Drew will say, well, just think of playing your harp, or, think of some music you want to do. And it totally switches you from that stressed position to a more centered, balanced approach to life.
Well, I think you verbalized that beautifully. It was eloquent and gorgeous. You said a soothing to my soul that just really touched me. And I think ultimately you may feel that you didn't verbalize it sufficiently or as
Yeah, my
much as
inner
you
critic's
wanted
like,
to.
what are you talking
Yeah.
about, girl?
We heard you though. We heard you, Karen. Thank you. Sean, what does drawing give you? What do you feel you achieve when you manage to lose yourself in it?
When when I'm in it, it's that thing of creative flow that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about. And it's almost like taking a drug. You suddenly you go from being tired, and if I can get in myself into that sort of flow state, suddenly this time goes away, and I'm in this space that's not thinking about bills and deadlines and preparing for the next day's classes and all those sort of common day-to-day things. It takes me out of myself, and that's really therapeutic. It's very invigorating. um, and then there's also the satisfaction of getting better over time. It's like
Yes.
there's those moments I'll finish a drawing, well, it usually happens. It's like when I'm on the airplane on my iPad playing Scrabble and I get bored, and every so often I'll just go to my little folder where I keep pictures of all my drawings, and I'll start from, gosh, 8 years ago when I picked it up again, or 9 years ago, and to see the arc, not only of the skill. It's like what I tell my students when they're narrating, and when they graduate, I say, I could tell you how far you've come, but the easiest way is go back and listen to the very first thing you ever did for me, and listen to it with a new set of ears, and you will understand how far you've come. And like Karen said, I can't describe that in words, but you can hear it, and you'll listen to your own recording, and you'll be able to find those moments you did right, what you could improve, but you'll have a whole new skill set. And so when I look at the arc that I've traveled, say, in the last, because my early stuff when I was in my teens and 20s, and it's all gone. I have no idea where that stuff's at. It's unfortunately been lost to too many moves over the years. But I can see an arc in not only content but the skill with the color. So you just get better in technique, and that's nice for myself. I feel proud of the work I've put in, and it's fun to go, well, I'll try something a little more challenging next time. I'll try this, I'll try that. And like I said, it becomes something just for me. And the ones that I really like, I share, because I really normally I only put up one a month. I try to time it to the first Sunday of the new month, more or less. And that's just something I've just decided to do. But in that month, I might draw anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 different pieces, big ones, and numerous little things, and decide, oh, that one's fun, or like I said, sometimes I'll publish something on my Facebook page that I drew 6 months ago. It's just been sort of hanging around, going, oh, I'll share that. That feels appropriate now. But yeah, no, it's about that sense of learning the skill, of getting into a flow state mentally. It's like when I narrate. I've done it for so long. When I'm in the groove, it's so much fun to narrate. And when I'm in the groove with my drawing, that's when an hour will go by, and I go, oh my God, it's 9 o'clock now. And then the food for the soul. I mean, I hate to be cliched about it. There's food for the soul. There's
Mhm.
the satisfaction of finally completing the piece. I will say there's one thing I have learned, as with drawing, is that sometimes I get in a hurry at the very end, and I've learned over the years to make myself stop, because you think, oh, if I go for 15 more minutes I'll get this done, and then inevitably I'll do some little mistake that I just makes me insane. And I've learned, no, walk away, come back tomorrow, finish it, and then you can start laying out the next drawing that you might want to do. Because why? Because there are no deadlines. This is a hobby, and it's meant to be fun. And like I said, there are times I have to, I'm so driven. And you know that I'm so driven as a person, as a teacher, and as a narrator. It's nice to have something that doesn't require that of me. And I hate to say it, but have to remind myself to take care of that and keep it precious, as it were.
I
May I
so
ask?
relate to all
Sorry.
of that.
May I ask if you turn to your hobbies in times of trouble, and can I ask you both to contemplate what you would do without them?
Karen?
Oh, well, I thought you were going to go first.
No, you go for it. Go ahead.
Well, and but I do so relate to everything you just said. Uh, and I note that, just to add to your comments, when if the if the notes are blurring together and I'm starting to make more mistakes, then that's a time to stop, because I don't want to practice in those, kind of bake those mistakes into the piece I'm playing. But yes, definitely in times of trouble, because I will even think about my harp or look at a picture of it if I'm not near it, and that changes my mindset. And I know what I did. There were 6.5 years when I didn't play, and I I thought I wanted to get back into music, so I bought another flute and I bought a piccolo. And then we bought a piano because Drew was interested in playing and he was playing for a while. And I have to say, I didn't play those instruments, and I still have them and still don't play them as much as I want to play the harp. So I I tried to live without it, but I can't and I don't want to. And so I don't. And I just want to add to this, Tanya Eby wrote a great article yesterday that if I could put it in the chat, I would. It's on, she called it Finding Time for Art. And she was talking about writing, but what she said really applies to any kind of art you want to do. And a lot of them will fall as a hobby and hopefully something you enjoy and not feel that you have to make your side hustle. But she had such a great quote. She said, "My creativity is not negotiable. It is a fundamental part of who I am. Without it, I walk around like an empty body without a soul, and I need my soul." And I get a chill just even saying her words to you because I that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, I I've always been expressive as a person, whether it was drawing or singing or when I started acting when about 10. It's so much a part of me. But if I couldn't draw anymore, let's say, let's say something happened and I couldn't physically draw anymore, well then I would try to find something else that's creative, whatever that might be, because it's really fundamental to who I am as a person. And so I would try to search around to come up with something that interests me, that has a bit of challenge to it, and start over. So, it just so happened to be sketching. It could have been something, whatever. I could have been, making clothes or jewelry or whatever as a hobby. But there's an expression there, you
Yes.
know, and it is that what's really wonderful is we know this as performers is that when you after so many years of working and practicing and developing your technique, you begin to transcend all that. It's a quote that I use with my students that Miles Davis, the jazz trumpeter, said, "It takes a long time to learn how to sound like yourself." And reintroducing myself into drawing after a very long hiatus has allowed me to, through the things I choose to draw, has allowed me to begin to draw like myself. Even though I am drawing things that have already been done, I'm not doing like Picasso or, Van Gogh interpreting something necessarily. It's still an expression of me. I'm putting my own little stamp because oftentimes I'll find a picture that I like, and I like this part of the picture, but I also like this part of this other picture, and so I'll put them together. And you won't ever know that because I don't necessarily publish the pictures that where I started, but I'm expressing myself through that material. And if you're going to be an artist, I can't imagine being an artist without a hobby. Now, having said that, I went for a long period of time where I didn't have the time. Two kids and a career, bringing raising a family with when I was married is a lot of work, and there's very little time left over. But if you can manage it, even like Karen said, for 5 minutes, 15 minutes to carve out that little bit of time for yourself, that's important.
Yeah, finding time is key, isn't it?
Oh
And
God.
I'm also really curious about how you find the thing that's right for you. Karen, you mentioned to me a book called I Could Do Anything If Only I Knew What It Was. And I've pinned a link to it at the top. Is that a book you had come across that you've read, or was it useful to you?
That was a life-changing book, and I say that in all seriousness because I read that book in 1992 or 91. But anyway, I was miserable at work, and she talks about figuring out what's important to you and how to get it. And she has all these different Barbara Sher was the author, who she's sadly passed on, but phenomenal work. She was like the original life coach. She also wrote a book called Wishcraft. And through these books, she had exercises and techniques for you to figure out what you really want and how to get it. But one of the exercises, actually a couple of the exercises that really are germane to this discussion, and it kind of pins on what Sean just said about that least amount of time you can do something. Because I hear from so many people who say, "Oh, I would love to do fill in the blank, whatever it is, but I don't have time." Well, we all have the same amount of time. It's how we use it. And if you can just say to yourself, because what happens is we have it's resistance. Resistance is standing up saying, "I don't want you to do what could be good for you. I'm going to fight you for every second of you trying to do what you want to do." And to get around that resistance, you just have to kind of trick yourself like, well, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes. It's like, what is the least amount of time you can do this, whatever it is, bake or draw or sing or dance or whatever? What's the least amount of time that you could possibly do it and not feel like you're fighting yourself or like, I don't have time? And we probably all have 5 minutes. So if you start with that 5 minute increment, what tends to happen is like, oh, this is fun. And then you kind of get in a groove, and 37 minutes later, you're still doing it. So that was one exercise. And then there was another one where she had you write down all the things you like to do. And you'd write down, how much does it cost? Who did you do it with? Was it a solo activity or a group activity? How often did you do it? And then you start to see there are a lot of things that you like to do that you've kind of just left by the wayside because you got busy with life. But maybe it doesn't cost anything to play music or to draw or to dance in your living room. Those things don't cost anything, and maybe that's something that you can reclaim that part of yourself. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it does have good exercises to help you have that richer, fuller, more purposeful life that we all want.
There was a years ago, um, I was given a book called How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci by Michael Gelb. This is back in the mid 90s. And it changed my life because he talks about different aspects of what made Leonardo a great artist. And he talks about these principles of his life, how to be curious, how to demonstrate your knowledge, your sense, sharpen your senses through, just senses. It's like my daughter, who's a bartender, her sense of taste and smell is so much more advanced than mine because she's approaching her work from love, from the taste. And, she experiences something on a level that I can't, but she's cultivating that. And then you so if I had to recommend a book that might help people start down this path, I would recommend that book, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. It's a wonderful book. You can get it on Amazon, and I think now there's even a workbook for it. But it caused me to sort of reassess what were the things I found interesting in my own life, or what was my food for the soul. So your hobby could be cooking, your hobby could be tasting wine, it could be whatever. It can be, my mother is a quilter. She grew up she's of that generation, that she made her own clothes from the 1950s and 60s, and now she quilts, and that's her hobby. And once again, she doesn't do it for money. She mainly makes quilts that she donates to the local women's shelter in Oklahoma City, where she lives. But she also, if I ask her nicely, she will make me baby quilts for my students who have children. Um, but she really gets that satisfaction out it, and she's done it for, gosh, almost 30 years now, just quilting. But it does. I really do feel that I'm a better narrator and I'm a better teacher because I have this creative hobby that feeds my soul. Now, granted, it's artistic, but it has nothing to do with language, right? Or when I play music, has nothing to do with language. But I do make this transition from the things that I experience when I'm drawing, like attention to detail, for instance, which is really the main part of it for me. One of the things that I do when I'm working with my students, or when I have my special weekend classes, when people come read for me, it always gets back to text analysis. Actually understanding what it is you're seeing, the word on the page and how it should be. If you learn how to see it and understand it correctly, it tells you what to do. It tells you which way to go with the choice and the acting and the performance. Well, when I'm looking at a photograph or the illustration, say, of the Beatles drawing that drawing, I pay attention to, oh, his hand is here, and oh, I see the color variation is different on this part of his jacket than it is on this part of his jacket, or whatever. And that attention to detail is something I can carry back into my work. So I think a good hobby is not only relaxing, but it is challenging in a fun way. And I think as artists, eventually you'll reach a level with it that you can bring some lessons you learn in the act of doing that hobby back into your work as an artist, as a narrator.
And if I can just tag onto that comment, I've been researching an article that I want to write about parallels of narration to music. And Ann Flosnick and I talked with Lorelei King several weeks ago on Ann's Narrator Uplift show on Clubhouse. And Lorelei had a fantastic observation. And here's her direct quote: In this business, being a musician or being able to read music is an advantage. I think you'll agree with me that one of the greatest skills that a narrator needs is to be able to read slightly ahead. You have to know what's coming up. In my experience, people who have studied music and can read music seem to have that skill more naturally. They can read ahead a lot, and because they're used to reading ahead with music, they can read ahead with texts as well. I think it's a good transferable skill. And like you were saying, Sean, being able to interpret certain things on the page, music is its own language, it's the universal language, they tell us. But being able to make an interpretation and uh, know what that means and know what to do with it, it's almost like understanding the subtext of a book. Like I say, I'm researching an article about it because there are many, many parallels to music and narration that even though I'm not using my breath in making my music, but there are still things at play there. So I feel like playing music does help me as a narrator in a different way.
Wonderful. Thank you. Are there any last? Well, I've suddenly realised we've only just come to the top of the hour, and I didn't have a moment to say if the audience would like to come up and chat with us, please feel free to do so. All those things. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to leave everybody with before we close up today?
Well, I just thank you so much for hosting this discussion. It's been really enlightening and fascinating to me. And it seems like there's been a lot of comments in the chat that people are enjoying it and making observations about it. So I just appreciate so much you hosting it and us having this time together to talk about something that seems on the surface like maybe it's not important, but as we get into it, we learn just how important it really is.
Yeah, we got to wrap this up because I have to go start sketching now.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for being here today. Thank you very much, Sean and Karen, for coming along. Today we talked about artistic hobbies. My takeaways, I was reminded that true self-confidence comes from the proof that you are who you say you are. And doing that where the stakes are low, as Sean described it, is a great place to find some wins. Put them into your store of places where you can prove yourself to yourself. Thank you very much to everybody who joined us today. Those who came into the conversation in the chat, thank you very much indeed. And to those of you in the audience who joined us and contributed with your presence and for listening, thank you very much. We couldn't do it without you. So do make sure and have a wonderful week, everybody. And let's go out and be our favourite selves. Take care.